Okay, I'm delighted to welcome back Rory McIlroy to the Genesis Scottish Open. Rory, obviously a lot of history has been created and you've got great history here in Scotland at this event, having won in the past, and this is the first time you're back on this side of the pond since completing the career Grand Slam. So how nice is it to be back around familiar faces in Europe?
Yeah, it is lovely. Got over to this side of the Atlantic a couple of weeks ago, trying to get settled into our new place down in Wentworth, and it's been really nice. It's lovely to get back up here and start to play a little bit of links golf, and it's a great week to shake any competitive rust off, and obviously with one eye looking ahead to next week at the Open. But great to be back. I guess this is a tournament and a golf course that has grown on me over the years. I don't think I started out too well here, but learned how to play the course a little bit better. Obviously had that great finish in 2023. Played well again last year. So looking forward to getting out there tomorrow and getting going.
Okay, we'll open the floor to questions. Going to go to Sean Zach first.
Rory, I enjoyed your could play in any era comment yesterday, hitting that persimmon. I was curious if you ever given much thought to that, like how your game would have suited in the 70s and 80s.
I'd like to think of myself more as an artist than a scientist when it comes to the game, and but I think in this generation and at this point with TrackMan and biomechanics and all the technological advances, I think my perception of myself as an artist, but I just think with the way the game has went over the last 20 years, we're probably more scientists than we are artists. But I'd like to think that I had the game or had the adaptability to do well in that era with that equipment.
Craig.
Hi, Rory. You'd spoken about getting back across to this side of the Atlantic, and obviously there's been so much going on in your life and everything that's happened. But can you have a kind of freedom when you come back here, almost kid-like, to get back to being the young guy and playing golf in the summer and the sunshine and the links? Can you be that young kid again and get free of all the other stresses? Yeah,
I feel like you can. The one thing I would say about the last couple of weeks is I felt like I could detach a little bit more and sort of hide in a way. And sometimes you need that to completely get away from, I feel like this world of golf can become all-encompassing if you let it. But I think if you remove yourself a little bit from that environment, it's, Justin Rose and I came up together here yesterday, and, we were just chatting about, there's a detachment from the sort of week in, week out grind when you get back over here for, when you play PGA Tour golf for that, sort of first 25, 30 weeks of the year. We were sort of talking about that yesterday on the way up here, but, it's been lovely to get back and see some familiar faces, and, and as Bryony said, it's the first time back, playing in the UK since, what happened at Augusta, which is that's a really nice feeling as well.
Martin.
Rory, when you think back to when you were a kid, how enjoyable was it this morning when a young lad had waited there since 7 o'clock to walk up that sixth hole with you? How satisfying is that still for you after all you've achieved in the game?
Yeah, I think, to me it doesn't seem that long ago that I was, standing in line to get autographs at the World Match Play at Wentworth or the World Golf Championship at Mount Juliet or whatever it is. So, and I remember how happy I was when a pro threw me a golf ball, or if they signed my hat or whatever it was. So, it's lovely to be able to do that for people, and it obviously doesn't it's not like I'm doing anything different. I'm just sort of going about my day, but it's nice to be able to have that effect.
Okay, and we'll just go to Brian now.
Hi Rory, good to see you again. You told us 12 months ago you hadn't had a holiday for a while. Now that you've got the Grand Slam in the pocket, will you take a little bit more time to enjoy life? Because it is a grind. You talk about the grind on the tour.
Yeah, I think I've done a good job of that since. I missed the cut of Troon and went straight to Portugal, so that was my first holiday. But then, yeah, I think over the past, I'd say the past 12 months, I think one of my New Year's resolutions was to have more fun. And I've really tried to do that. So whether it's, me and a bunch of friends went to Dortmund in January and watched the Borussia Dortmund Bayern Leverkusen game. We then stopped off in Istanbul for a night out on our way over to Dubai. So, Poppy's starting to learn how to ski. So we went to Montana in February and, took a skiing holiday. And, I think there's opportunities throughout the year that you can do these sorts of things. And I think now, at the stage of life that I'm at, I'm actually trying to build my schedule around those weeks instead of the other way around, trying to sort of fit them in here, or can I take 4 days off? It's more, no, these are going to not take the priority, but they're going to become more important in scheduling the year. And then, fit the golf tournaments around those.
We're going to go to the back middle.
Hey Rory, I was out with Matt Wallace yesterday in the Pro-Am, and he mentioned that amateurs don't quite understand how good you guys are. In particular, he mentioned you and Scotty, and when you go to places like Oakmont, how easy you guys can make the golf course look. Just how difficult is it to stay on top of your game for a long period of time, and how much does it take out of you, and how do you keep on top of it, basically?
Yeah, I think it's one of the underappreciated things about any sport, and anyone, like you look at what Novak Djokovic is doing at Wimbledon over the last couple of weeks, or what some of those guys have done, or what someone like Cristiano Ronaldo still doing at 40 years old, or a Tom Brady in American football. That longevity piece, I think, is something that maybe isn't talked about enough, because once you get to a certain level, I feel like the journey on the way up is almost, I'm not going to say it's easy, but you have that momentum and you're riding that wave to the top, and then once you get there, it takes just as much work, if not more work, to stay there. Because I think about my career, before I won this major this year, the last major I won in 2014, I'd never heard of Scotty Scheffler. So these talents and these players just keep coming and keep getting better each and every generation. And I think you have to adapt your game to make sure that you're able to hang with these generations. And I feel like I'm one generation ahead of Scotty, for example, who's still in his 20s, and you see all these younger kids that are coming up, the likes of a Michael Torbjornsson or a Luke Clanton, or these guys that basically are ready to play at the top level coming out of college. And you have to you have to make sure you're staying on top of what makes you such a great player, but you also have to look at the trends and see, okay, well, the guys that are playing well, what are they doing, or is there something that I need to add to my repertoire to keep trying to stay ahead of them? So I think that is a very important piece of it. And this is it's my 18th year on tour. I've been winning professional events for 16 years, and I just think my drive to keep trying to get a little bit better, or trying to look for little holes in my game that I can tidy up, I think that's a big piece of it.
Can we go Ian Carter, please?
Hi, Rory. I just wonder if I could ask you to reflect on what an incredible past 20 years it's been for golf on the island of Ireland, obviously with your major successes and the other guys, but also the fact that the Open is going back to Royal Portrush next week. In years to come, historians are going to look at that period and see it in an incredible light, I would imagine. I just wonder what your reflections on that would be.
Yeah, I think it. Look, Padraig Harrington got the ball rolling. You know, he won the Open in 07 at Carnoustie, and then he obviously won the back-to-back majors in 08, and I think that the other Irish players looked at that and that gave them belief. So, you know, GMAC goes and wins the US Open in 2010. I remember being at home in Northern Ireland after missing the cut that week, watching him do what he did at Pebble Beach, and I played basically all my practice rounds with GMAC at that point. And I thought, well, if he can win the US Open, then there's no reason why I can't. And then I go and I win the US Open the next year, and then you see, you know, Darren Clarke go and win at St. George's, and I just think that having people that you're close to and your peers do something that you may think is a little bit out of reach gives you that belief that you can do it. And I think just that momentum that we all had at that period in time, and in conjunction with the RNA looking at Royal Portrush to potentially host the Open Championship again, and then for it to go there, I think it's Irish golf. I think, you know, and the players that have come through and how well that we've done. But I also think it's a great representation of how far Northern Ireland has come in the last 30 or 40 years. You know, because in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, you know, no one would have dreamt of hosting an Open Championship in Northern Ireland in those times. So I think it's a testament to the people of Northern Ireland for how far, you know, we as a country have come as well.
Bob.
Hey, Rory. I was going to ask something similar about Portrush, and obviously a lot of it occurred before your time, but you seem to have a good perspective on just how far that has come, and the idea that it's not only hosting one but now two in a short amount of time from where it came from. Do you have a good sense of that? Maybe from your dad even, or, you know, people that you grew up with or were older than you? Yeah,
I mean, I lived a little bit of it, but I was, you know, I think my generation honestly couldn't care less about, you know, what had happened in the past, and, you know, everyone's, you know, just looking forward. But yeah, you know, my mum and dad both grew up in the, you know, 60s and the 70s, and, you know, Northern Ireland was a very different place. And yeah, it's I feel very fortunate that I'm of the generation I am, that I didn't have to deal with any of that, or very little of it. But yeah, it's come a long way, and I think just the support of, you know, I think people really appreciate when a huge sporting event that the world's eyes are on that week. You know, everyone there really appreciates that, and you know, excited to show the country in the best light possible.
And no, sorry, Bob, we've got to go behind.
Hi, Rory. In terms of this week,
last one.
it seems to be a tournament that's getting bigger and bigger. The field is getting stronger and stronger. Would that suggest there's more to this tournament than just the build-up to next week?
Absolutely. I think there's a lot that sets this tournament apart. I think a few of the changes that were made to the golf course over the years, I think the majority of the field like the golf course a little better than, say, back in 2019, for example. I know that Padraig Harrington has made a few little tweaks here and there. And then I think the fact that it's become a co-sanctioned event, you know, I think that's a big, you know, especially for, you know, some of the top guys in America to come over knowing that they're playing an event in Europe, but they're getting FedEx Cup points. It's sort of crunch time in that race as well. So I think that's a big part of it. You know, having a great sponsor like Genesis that, you know, has put a lot of money behind this event, and both tours in general with, you know, their Genesis Invitational over in California. You know, personally for me, their support of TGL in America as well. You know, they've put a lot of money behind golf. So I think to have a really good, stable sponsor like that helps tremendously as well. And it's a, you see the social posts of the American guys going out and playing North Berwick at 9 o'clock at night and all that. I think that has a certain appeal to some guys as well. So, and it's logistically, as golf tournaments go, this couldn't be any easier. You stay on site, the range is really good, the course is benign enough that you don't feel like you're getting beaten up before the Open Championship, and I just think all that together, it makes for a recipe for a very good golf tournament.
Okay, we're going to finish up with Doug, please.
When you want to win the Masters, you and everybody basically, and if you don't, then you've got next April, etc. But what is it like when you'd like to win as a pro in your home country and you have so few chances? I mean, how many times has it been at just one, the Irish Open at Royal County Down?
Twice.
Twice.
It's been twice.
Number either way.
Yeah. Yes. I think it's the same thing. If venues in golf matter to you, it maybe puts a little bit more pressure on you. So, I'd love to win an Open at Portrush. Absolutely. I'd love to win an Open at St Andrews. I'd love to win a US Open at Pebble Beach. I'd love to win a PGA at PGA Frisco. But no. But it's like there's venues in the game that just mean a little bit more. Frisco might get there one day, who knows? But and I think as well, having Portrush and from home and the experience I had there last time, I want to. The Friday was amazing. The Thursday not so much. But yeah, it's a little like when Djokovic won the Olympics last year, he knew that was going to be his final chance, and you saw the emotion and you saw how much it meant to him. Yeah, you think about it and you can't pretend that it's not there, but when you're on the golf course, you just have to go out there and play as if you're not playing at home and just play as if it's another golf tournament. But yeah, it obviously is a little more, it has a little more like emphasis, or there's something extra there, just like there is at an Open at St Andrews or a US Open at Pebble Beach, for example.
Rory, thank you for your time.
Thank you.